Hello class, welcome to week 9 of Python, our programming logic with Python. So this week we kind of have a couple homework assignments. We have actually four. So I'm going to pull up the syllabus. We have lab activity 6.1a, 6.1b, 6.4, and 6.5. So yeah, we do have more homework assignments, but they're actually not as difficult as you guys might think they are. They're relatively quick homework assignments, so that's kind of why I gave you more than the typical two or three. So this video is going to be focused on kind of the logic behind the homework assignments. There will be a separate video for just understanding dictionaries and sets themselves, like the concept of a dictionary and set. The PowerPoint is on Blackboard, so I would recommend looking at the PowerPoint first. Before you do the homework assignment, try to do the homework assignment on your own, but if you need this video will be there for you. And then the additional video will also be coming out as well, and that's just so that you understand the concept of dictionaries and sets, which is what we are covering this week. It's not too complicated. Dictionaries and I guess sets are just like it's it's funny because last week we dealt with let me just we dealt with lists and tuples, and we've dealt with lists and tuple, or at least lists in prior weeks. Tuples was just like kind of like a branch off list. They were relatively similar but with some distinctions between the two. And now with dictionaries and sets, it's actually another sort of variation of what a list is. And with the only difference being like the different types of functionality that it gives you as like a programmer. So enough with that. There's going to be a separate video for that. So for this video, like I said, we're going to go through the labs. So the first lab I have in front of me is lab activity 6.1a, creating a dictionary. So for this lab, it's like the very basic ground floor kind of lab activity. It just wants you to create a dictionary in Python. So the first step, they say go to your main.py file. They say use the dict function or curly bracket notation to create a dictionary and assign it to a variable location. So there's a couple ways you can assign a empty dictionary to the variable location. The first way would be doing location equals dict, standing for dictionary, and then you just do the parentheses, or the quotation, or yeah, parentheses. That would be assigning a empty dictionary to location, the variable location, if I were to write that. Another way of writing a dictionary is right here. They give you an example of a dictionary. The only difference between this example and what I wrote is that my dictionary is empty. This dictionary is populated with some what they call a key. A key is essentially just like, think of a key as a variable that exists inside of the dictionary. So like, just as location is the variable here, and then the value is dict, which stands for dictionary. Here inside of the dictionary, state is what they call a key, sort of like the variable. It acts like a variable. And then CA, which is California, in a string format, is representing what they call a value. So it still keeps the same word as a value. That's all they're doing. They're just populating this dictionary with keys and values. Here, my dictionary is just empty. Both are correct, but for what they want us to do, so create a dictionary and assign it to a variable location, which we've done. So within a print function, use the built-in type function on location to see if it is an instance of a dictionary class. So I don't actually have to populate my dictionary because they don't really care about that. Now I could put stuff in here. I could just copy and paste this and put it in here. that would work as a dictionary, which is what they want for number 2, or I can just do what I did, location equals dictionary, because that's technically a dictionary, it's just empty. Just as you would create an empty list by doing something like test equals, that's an empty list, because we know a list is defined by square brackets, so it's kind of the same concept. So when they say print out uh, the dictionary, but not just print out the dictionary, print out the type of like the variable that holds the dictionary. So the variable that holds this dictionary is location. So they want you to use the built-in type function. So the built-in type function, we have used it before. It's just type, open parentheses. So I have the parentheses that are the parentheses that belong to type, and then the parentheses that belong to print. So don't get that mixed up. And then inside of it, I'm just going to put the variable of location, because location, while it's a variable, it actually holds my dictionary. So it's just it'll work when I do this. So now when I do Python 3 main.py, it's giving me a class of dictionary. Why? Because this variable holds a dictionary, and that's what type is doing. It's saying what value is this variable holding, and like what class or what type is it. In this case, it's dictionary. And when I do the check mark, it should give me full marks. Yep, 2 out of 2 checks pass. They just, so essentially this lab, create a dictionary however you want, populate it, don't populate it, and then use the built-in type function. And if you don't know how to use the built-in type, or if you don't know the syntax of the built-in type function, you could always Google built-in type function, and it'll just say type open parenthesis, put your argument inside of it. In this case, the argument is our variable location, and it's just going to give me the type of whatever value is associated with location. So very simple. It looks complicated. It's not. That's why I was like telling you guys at the beginning. Yes, I gave you 4 homework assignments, but they're actually pretty easy. Just don't overcomplicate it. They try to make you think that you have to populate your dictionary by putting all this nonsense here. You don't, because you're not actually printing out the dictionary. Now, say if they wanted you to print out like the contents of the dictionary, then you would have to type something in here, else it'd be empty. But they don't. They don't want you to do that. They just want the type of the variable that holds the dictionary. So that's 6.1a. I believe the next one is 6.1b. Okay, so we'll go to that one. It's right next to it. Great. So I'm going to do start assignment. So for the second one is a little bit longer. We are kind of going back to functions slightly. Um, so writing a function, oh, let me just erase that. We'll get to it. This one takes a little bit more explaining just so that you could understand the concept behind it. So I'm not going to read all of this because it is a lot. So the scenario, given a word, write a function that will output a dictionary. So a function is like def and then whatever the name of the function is, and then you would put your argument in there, and then the colon, and so on. If you need the format for the function, you guys can always go back to a previous week. I believe it was week 7. So just look at the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will have the format of the function, of how to write a function if you need that. So that will output a dictionary that will give each character of the word and its frequency. Okay, so the fact that I'm going to be going over, the dictionary is going to store all this information, because that's what dictionaries are used for, essentially. Think of a dictionary as a list, so it's going to store data inside of it. So if it's going to output a dictionary, and the dictionary is going to store information of each character of a word, we don't know what the word is, and the frequency of each character in that word. Okay. So the aim, due to its key value pair, okay, so I'm not going to read that. And then okay, so you guys could read the aim. The aim is just kind of giving you background on the purpose of a dictionary. Actually, okay, I don't need that. So I'm going to go down to skips for completion. Do read this. It'll probably be helpful for you guys. So steps for completion, number one, define the function word counter. So, okay, they give me the name of the function, which is great. And I know how to start off a function. A function always begins with def, so def, and then I do the name of the function. So in this case, it's word counter, and then it's always the parentheses. In this case, they want it to take a string argument. So the argument's going to go inside of the parentheses. They don't give me a name for this argument, they just say a string argument, which is fine. So I can name this whatever I want. I will name it like, so if it's word counter, let's do word. All right, it doesn't really matter what we put in here. They don't tell us what they like the specific argument name for it. It's just we have to be consistent when we use it later on. So I'm gonna go down. So before I go to step two says iterate, and when it says iterate, that means I'm gonna use a type of loop. And we've learned loops from a previous week, I believe it was week 6. So whenever you see iterate, just know in your mind they're asking for a loop. In this case, I believe we can use a for loop. I think that'll probably be the easiest one. It's the one I always default to anyways. So iterate through the string and count the occurrences of each character. So before we get to that, you remember all of this information, like in the scenario, remember said output it to a dictionary. So this loop is gonna count the occurrences of each character, but that has to be placed somewhere. And in this case, this week, we're doing dictionaries. So we're gonna put it in a dictionary, but in order to put it in a dictionary, the dictionary first must be created. So it doesn't exist yet. There's no code for a dictionary. Remember in that first example, I created an empty dictionary by just creating a variable name. So in this case, so if I use this function is word counter, my argument is words. So for this dictionary name, I'm going to call it counter. It really doesn't matter what you call it, but this is just like what I'm calling it. You can call it whatever you or whatever else you want. It's up to you. And then if we're going to do an empty dictionary, the dictionary is surrounded with curly brackets. So I am just going to do open close curly bracket, and that's it. And my dictionary is created, but it's empty. So I'm going to press enter just so that I have room. So now I can go to number 2 and actually create that for loop. So the for loop, I believe we covered that. So loops was in, yeah, week 6. If you need the syntax for the for loop or for any loop, if you guys want to use a different loop, you guys can try it. But the syntax is on the PowerPoint for week 6. So for number 2 for loop, so you start with for. The next thing is the dummy variables. The dummy variable doesn't matter what you call it. Okay, I'm just gonna pause right there. So I just realized the amount of times I say it doesn't matter what you call it, but it really doesn't, because they're very open-ended in what they're in like the freedom they're giving you as far as the argument, as far as the variable name that's going to hold your dictionary, and as far as the dummy variable that goes after for. This dummy variable is just representing each, I guess, element or each index of a whatever we're going to iterate through. So like if we're iterating through a word called hello, this dummy variable, or this dummy variable is going to represent the H, it's going to represent the E, L, L, O. It's going to represent each of those letters as it goes through the loop. So this can be, because it's going to represent each, I guess, character in a word, we can call it char, or C-H-A-R. And then the next word is always going to be in. This is never going to change. And now, what are we iterating through? What was that? So this is going to store the dictionary. This is the function name. So we're not iterating through the function. We're iterating through the argument that exists within the function. In this case, this argument that says word is actually representing whatever the actual word is. We're not iterating through word itself. Word is going to be, I guess, well, okay, so maybe this isn't the best. Okay, so this is a function. I just realized the mistake I've made. So this is the function. This is not the argument. This is the parameter. Uh, I got ahead of myself. So a parameter is even though step one said have it take a string argument, the argument will be called later on when we actually print out or call the function. So this is a parameter. So a parameter is just kind of like a placeholder, and the string argument will be passed later on. The string argument being whatever word. In this case, if I skip ahead to number 4, the string is going to be Mississippi. So Mississippi is going to take the place of word. This is just a placeholder. So character is my dummy variable that represents each letter in the parameter word. So if I'm using a word up here, I have to use word down here because this is representing what Mississippi will be later on. If that makes sense. If you need help on loops, it's you have to go back a couple weeks, but it's the same concept. We haven't even gotten to dictionaries yet here. So this is just loops. So within my for loop, I'm saying for every character in whatever word we're going to use, now I have to say, okay, so iterate through the string and count the occurrences of each character. So the way we do this is to count how many times each character appears in that word. And okay, so the frequency, I'll put each character as a key. So if we look at the output right here, when they ran the script, it gave you the letter of the word. So like if the word is Mississippi, it's going to give you the letter M, and it's going to tell you M appeared one time. M is representing the key, and 1 is representing the value. So M appears in Mississippi one time. So that's why it says 1. Whoops. And I is the second letter in the word of Mississippi, and I appears in Mississippi 4 times, S 4 times, and P 2 times. So that's the output we need. So to get that, we need to print out not only each letter, but only one time. Like the letter, so M could only be printed out one time, and the loop has to count how many times M exists in the loop. As for I can only appear one time, or like print out one time, and then we have to count how many times I appears throughout the loop. So to do that, the first thing we have to do, we created our for loop. The next thing is we're going to use an if statement. So we're going to say if character is not, I'm going to explain this. I'm just going to write this first. Is not blank. So when you do the 2 quotation marks, it could be either double quotation or single quotation. I'm just saying if the character is not like a blank character. So like if like the word had spaces, because it's enclosed in strings. So like say the string wasn't Mississippi. Say the string was I am tired, right? So what this line is doing is it's saying if the character is not just like a blank space, so like this blank space in between I and am and tired, if it's not a blank space, then do something. And I'm going to write what it does. But this line is important just in case the word has blank spaces. So that's why I'm starting off my if statement with that. If you don't have this line and you just go straight to counting each letter in the word, then it'll work, but you run into the issue of, like I said, if that string had spaces, then it's gonna count the spaces, and you don't want that. So that's what that line does. So the next line is, it's not gonna be, I'm not gonna actually write something. Well, I am gonna write something, but it's gonna be another if. So an if within an if. So if character is not blank, and if, I don't write and, but I mean like, that's the concept. So if character is not blank, and if character encounter character in counter. Yeah, so if character is in counter, counter, character in counter, counter, character plus equals, no, I'll do plus equals, it's 1. So I'll stop right there to explain it. So if character is not a blank space, and if character exists in the dictionary counter, counter for that specific character, add 1. So this is handling, as it's looping through and it's adding each character to the dictionary, it's saying if the character already exists in the dictionary, then for that specific letter of the word, like say for Mississippi, so like say the thing is looping through I, and I was already placed in the dictionary once, and it finds I again. It says if character is in counter, or if character in counter, if character is in the dictionary, then for counter, for the dictionary counter, for that specific letter, and that's why I wrote character, because remember, character represents each specific letter, add 1 to the counter character. So counter character just means that specific letter in the word, that specific letter in the dictionary counter. So that's what that's doing. And I'll show you when it runs. You'll see it. So that's handling if the letter already exists in the dictionary counter. So what if the letter doesn't exist in the dictionary counter yet? How do we handle that? Well, for that, we're going to use the else statement. So the else statement will be for if the letter isn't in the dictionary yet. So for this, we're going to do counter character, because that's not going to change, because counter just means dictionary, so dictionary, because the name of the dictionary is counter, and then character means the specific letter it's iterating through, the for loop. I'm going to say equal 1. So if you find M as you're looping through, and it hasn't, M doesn't exist in the counter yet, add 1. Add 1 to M. And that's all it's doing. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do return counter. And what that does, or counter. And what that does is it just returns the list, or the dictionary. But returning the dictionary is different than printing it out for the user. So if I were to go to Python 3 main.py, it shouldn't print out anything. Oh, if character is not, did you mean it's not with a literal? It should work if we run this. So obviously we have to print this out for the actual user, which is step 4. They just say print this. So I can just copy and paste that. Well, I'm not gonna, I'll just write it out. So word counter is the name of the function inside of it. That string argument that's going to take the place of word. Mississippi. So now it's still going to give me a syntax error, but it should actually give me the letters. So I got I got M appearing once, I got I appearing 4 times, S 4 times, and P 2 times. Now I believe if I change it to this, it should also work and probably take away the syntax error. Yeah, so it took away the syntax. So the only difference is what I put before was I said if character is not an empty string, so if it's not just a blank or space, then take into account the if-else statement. What this is saying is if character is not or is not equal to a blank space, which is kind of the same thing. You will see in a later activity that it doesn't always return the same result. In this case it does, but in other times it doesn't always, because they're different. But in this case we can use this, it's fine. It'll be clean. And if I do the task check, gave me 3 out of 3 checks. So this is probably the hardest example we will go through, only because it's a little bit confusing, because you have the for loop, you have an if statement inside of it, you have a nested if else inside of the if statement, and then at the end you're returning counter, which is returning essentially the dictionary. Um, but you're returning the dictionary with all of the actual data inside of it, because right here it's an empty dictionary. This whole for loop is gonna not only add each letter, each, I guess, character of the word. In this case, the word is Mississippi, but it's also going to count how many times that character, each character exists in the word. So like M is 1, I is 4, and then when I do return counter, it's just returning the final list. But it doesn't actually print it out for the user. This prints out the user. We have to call the function of word counter and then pass the argument of Mississippi. Um, yeah. So this one's the hardest one. I'm pretty sure it's the hardest one for this week. So if you guys do have trouble with this one, definitely watch the video. I think the hard part is not the actual dictionary, it's the loop. I guess having the um, creativity to create a loop that can handle the requirements they're asking. That's the hard part, not the actual dictionary. So if you struggle with this, I would say go back to week, what was it, week 6? Just go over loops again and then come back, and it'll be maybe a little bit easier. Yeah, this one, it is what it is. So let's go to the next example, the next lab activity, which is 6.4. So 6.4, building a set. So now we're moving away from dictionaries, we're going into sets. If you guys need, oh, okay. Maybe I just close out of that. We'll go to, I may have had it open for too long. Sometimes it gives me that error. So was it 6.4? Okay. 6.4, building a set. Hopefully it works. Don't give me the error. We'll see. Okay, cool. Probably gonna have. Okay, so they give you the first or the second part, which is the if statement with all of this, which is fine, great. Um, the stuff we have to do is up here, and again, they want us to write a function. I guess they really enjoy functions, which is, I mean, okay, but we kind of dealt with functions in week 7, so it just kind of shows how everything builds off itself. Like in the previous lab activity, it was really loop focused, not as much dictionary focused. The loop was storing the data in the dictionary, but I mean, it wasn't like we did a whole lot with the dictionary. We created an empty dictionary, and then the loop populated it for us. In this case, we're going to create a function again. They don't want us to use a loop this time, so if you guys didn't enjoy the last activity, you're going to like this one because there's no loop. They want us to do something else. They want us to work with sets, which is also included in this week's PowerPoint. There are a couple slides I dedicated to sets, and I will explain it in the other YouTube video as well. The scenario is, imagine that you have some data in a list that contains a lot of duplicates that you want to remove, but for simplicity's sake, you want to avoid writing a for loop and building a new list. Okay. The aim of this activity is to build a set out of a random set of items. Write a function called list_set that takes a list and turns it into a set. Do not use a for loop or while loop to do so. Great. I really like that last sentence, because that last problem hurt my head. Okay, so steps for completion. Define the function. Okay, so def list to set, they already do it for me. Great. I'll just write what they write, and then obviously you add the parentheses after the fact. It's going to take an argument of a list, and in this case they give me the name of the argument. The last time they didn't, so I'll just do the list, and then I'll do a colon, because you end it with a colon. So inside of it, within the list to set function, we're inside the list to set function, as you know, because I indented here. Well, it indented for me. It does it when you add the colon and press enter. So use another function to convert the list into a set, return the set. So even though they broke number 2 and 3 apart, they're technically the same. They're all one line of code. So return the set. So what that means is we're just going to return the we're going to return this function. So I'm going to do return. And you guys are familiar with functions. When you write a function, then you return it. We did it in the last activity as well. In this case, even though they broke it into two separate numbers or steps to complete this, it's really the same line. So you start with return. They want us to use another function to convert the list into a set. And this is a list, and the reason I know it's a list is because it's in these square brackets. So to the way we're going to convert this list into a set is we're going to use the set built-in function, which is just set, open parenthesis, and then in this case, we're going to do so I guess where you might get confused is why I'm going to write the list here. You're going to be like, okay, well, you wrote the list here, and then you wrote the list here. Why did you write it here? Well, when we're doing print list to set is actually the name of the function that we just created, that they told us to create. That's why they told us to name it this. And then this right here is not the argument. Once again, it's like the last activity that we did. This is the parameter. It's like a placeholder for the actual list, which is this. And then when we do return, and then we do set, and then we put the parameter here, that just means when we do print list to set, think of it as it's returning set and it's returning this. So it's essentially doing the set function here. The point of the set function, writing set and then the parenthesis here, is it's going to turn whatever's inside of the parenthesis into a set. If it's a list, it's going to become a set, and when we print it out, you're actually going to see it. So python3 main.py. So notice how it has curly brackets around it. So that just means it created a set. It also took away the duplicates. And it did that without having to, like manually remove them with any specific method. It saw the list, converted it into a set, and removed the duplicates just by writing set. So if you guys get confused, just think of these two things. The list, it's the same thing. It's just a placeholder. And when we're writing this function, it's just kind of like we're giving instructions, and then down here we're executing the instructions. So when we say print, and then we give the name of this function, and then we actually put an argument, which is our list, into the function, it's just gonna, all it's doing is it's putting this here into the list, converting it into a set. The function's going to return that, which is essentially saving that data into Python, and then Python's going to print it out for the user. And when Python prints it out to the user, it's going to print it out as a set, which is why we have curly brackets and not square brackets. That's how we distinguish between the two. And if we look at the expected output, it's this. So if I go to task to check to see if it's good, 3 out of 3 checks. So just 2 lines of code. That's all you had to write. Pretty simple, a lot simpler than last activity. So that is that. And then the last one is 6.5. So 6.5, where is it? Okay. So this one is a little bit more involved, but not as hard as the second lab activity that we did. I think this one's a little bit easier to understand, even though we will use loops. It's not like a double nested loop. It's just a singular nested loop. So, gonna backspace this. They give you the code on the bottom, which is great. I'm gonna leave that here. So let's look at the scenario. So given two lists, which are right here. So this is the first list. This is the second list. Create a function that returns a list of all the elements in both lists with no duplicates. So we have two separate lists down here, and it looks like this name before the list, unite list, is going to be the name of our function. So the aim of this activity is to implement an algorithm that returns the union of elements in a collection. Although working with sets is quick and easy in Python, sometimes we might want to find the union between two lists. Create a function called uniteList, which uses a loop to go through both lists and return common elements. Do not use the built-in set function. So they don't want us to use the shortcut that we used in the previous example because that would make it too easy, even though it would work. Here they want us to use an actual loop to print out both lists together without the duplicates. So they're just testing us essentially. So let's go along with the scenario they have. First, they want us to define a function named uniteList. So it's going to be def, and then uniteList. And then inside of here, we have to put our parameters. And parameters are just placeholders. And the two parameters, and the reason I know it's two is because they mention it up here, given two lists. And I see the two lists right here. So these two lists are going to, when the code executes, are going to take the place of the two parameters I'm going to put right here. So this can be whatever I want. I can name it whatever I want. I could do list1, and then list2, and then I'll do the colon. Okay, now I'm inside of my function. So inside of here, I need to, using a for loop, iterate through the two lists while finding the common elements in both lists without duplicates. So it looks like they want me to output this into a brand new list, which is fine. And I know that because it's square brackets. I always look at the brackets. That's how I know what they want. So in order for me to combine these into a brand new list, I have to create a place where where the data can be put into. So I'm going to create an empty list. I'm going to call this united list. It's different. It's technically different than the function because the function is unite list and this is united list. And I'm going to equate this to an empty list, which is done by just putting two square brackets next to each other. So now I have to do the for statement. So using a for statement, iterate through the two lists. So iterate through the two lists. Let's do that first. So for, and then the next thing is the dummy variable. So I'll just do, not index. It's technically index, but we'll do element because each index position here is an element of the list. So I'll do for element in, this will always stay the same, list, what did I call it, list 1 plus list 2, because I wanted to iterate through both of them, not just one. So for every element in list 1, so every element in here, and in list 2, I wanted to check both. You could do this, and the way you do it is through the plus operator. So that might be new to you, but it is technically correct. So inside of the for loop, I am just going to create one if statement. So I'm going to say if And this if statement, the reason it's needed is it's going to handle duplicates. Because it's not just printing out the list together. Because if I didn't have to worry about duplicates and I was just able to combine the list as is, then I could just do my for statement of for each element in list 1 and 2, print out element or something like that, or return element. I could do something like that. But because I have to handle the scenario in which a duplicate number appears from both lists, that's why I have to use the if statement. So if element, um, element. So here's where I was mentioning before the difference between not in and not equal to. So you might be tempted to use not equal to, but it's not actually going to work. You have to use not in, and then what's the name of my list? My new list that I created, United List, and that's from up here. So if an element, so as it prints out through the loop, and it iterates through each element of both of the list, I'm saying if the element, so if the number 2 is not in United List, I'm going to tell it United List dot append element. So I'm saying if the element does not already exist in my new combined list, append that specific element to my list. So what append is doing is it's adding it to the end of the list. So since the list's currently empty the first time it loops through, when it sees 2, it's going to say, okay, 2 doesn't currently exist in your new master list of United List. So I'm just going to add 2 to the very end. And the end is technically the beginning. So it's just going to add 2. Then it's going to go to 4. Does 4 currently exist? No? Okay, so add 4. Actually it's, yeah, it's going to add 4. Does 6 currently exist? No. Okay, so we're going to add 6. Does 8 currently exist? No, we'll add 8. Then it's going to say, does 3 currently exist? No, we'll add 3. Does 6 currently exist? Yes. So we're not going to append 6 again, because it currently exists in this master list. Does 9 currently exist? No. Okay, we'll add it to the end, and it's just going to keep on going. Does 12 exist? No. Okay, we'll add it to the end, and it's going to stop there. Because at this point, it iterated through both of the lists. And obviously, you're not going to put this in here, but it's just to show you what it's actually going to do. And then after that, so since we've now dealt with duplicates, now all we have to do is return, and then we have to do, what are we going to return? Our United List, which is where all the data currently sits in. And now if we run it, it gives me that list. And I want to show you the difference between not in and not equal to. So if I do not equal to, you're going to see that it's going to give me 6 twice. Why? Because not equal to means the element is not equal to the list, which doesn't really make sense. So like, is 4 equal to a list of 2? No, it's not, so it's going to add it. So this doesn't really make logical sense. When you say not in, it means that the element doesn't, is not currently, does not currently reside in that specific area, in this case the list of United List. It makes more logical sense using not in this case. In the other case, you could use both, and it does the same thing. But in this case, not in and not equal to is not the same thing. So that's that. We can do check in the task, and it should say correct. Yep, 3 out of 3 checks. And that's it. That's the 4 homework assignments. So, like I said, the second one is probably the hardest one, more for the loop, not so much the actual understanding of dictionaries. And then this example is, I wouldn't say it's hard. I would say that it's you have to know the stuff you need. So the first thing you do is you have to create a function. They tell you that straight out in number one, to create a function. The second thing is look at the output. What do they want you to output? They want you to output, always look at the brackets. If it's a square bracket, you know it's a list. Um, and you can say, oh, well, they already have two lists. It'll just create a whole list for me. It doesn't. You have to create an empty list to place the data that you're going to be picking out from the two lists. Because essentially what you're doing is you have like two baskets and you want to put it in a new basket. But they don't just give you a new basket to put like the apples in. Because like you say you have a basket full of apples and oranges and you want to combine them into your shopping cart, you need to get a shopping cart first. So that's the point of creating this empty list. And then when you do the for loop, you're saying, okay, so for every apple and for every orange that I move into my shopping cart, um, well, that's okay. So this first for loop, this first for line, this line that creates the for loop, is essentially saying for every apple or orange that I put into my shopping cart. Stop right there. Then the if statement is saying if I find an apple or orange that is not currently in my shopping cart, I'm gonna put it in my shopping cart. And that's all this if statement's saying. Now you can say, okay, well that means if you find a apple or orange that is similar in, like visual or um, yeah, like if it's visually like the same size or if it's like the same type of apple, then what happens there? Well, it doesn't get added because we don't have a condition that deals with that, so it just straight doesn't get added. It doesn't get appended to united lists. And then we're returning the list, and then obviously these two are the arguments that we're putting into our parameters here. This is the function name, and that's why it prints out Python 3 main.py. It prints out only these numbers, and when it's iterating through the list, because I did 4 element in list 1, and list 1 is first, that means it's going to iterate through these 4 elements first. So when it adds each of these, notice it's 2, 4, 6, 8. It doesn't do it in order. It does it in the list order that I told it to. So if I did list 2 and list 1 here, should change the, yeah, so it's going to start with 3, it's going to do 6 from here, 9, 12, and now it's going to eliminate 6 from list 1 because it already appeared in list 2. So 2, 4, 8. So you could do it either way. It'll work either way. The order in which you tell the for loop to go is going to affect how the results look. So this one might not give you full marks because it's a different order. So yeah, 0 out of 3 checks. So do list 1 first because that's how they want it. But in a real environment, it'll work both ways. Just showing you that it works both ways. Okay. So that's it. That is the 4 lab activities. So there will be a separate video that will explain dictionaries and sets. And again, if you need help with loops, like just understanding loops, I would recommend going back to week 6 because obviously everything builds off the previous weeks. Even though when I do give you the test, I'll give you like questions or programming questions that deal with the specific stuff we went over. So I guess for test 2, it's going to be loops, functions, list and tuples, and dictionaries and sets. So 4 things. So do review that because the test is next week. So I guess this was a good opportunity. If you guys are feeling a little bit iffy on loops, go over that. If you guys need more practice with functions, go back to functions, look at those videos, go through the lab activities again. Even though you guys completed them, if it lets you go through the lab activities, if not, there are these practice exercises that I don't assign for any homework, but they can be good help, I guess, in like just practicing different parts. So like this one says adding, reading, editing, and building a set. So that can be good practice. Go through those. That can help you with the actual programming part of test two. Like just like test one, I gave you a programming question. These little practice exercises could be helpful for that. Just so that you guys are feeling comfortable in the topics that are going to be included in test two. But obviously, I would recommend going through the videos again, um, and because there will be multiple choice questions for test two, as there was for test one. But I think towards the end of the week, I'll give you guys a Blackboard announcement that kind of goes over what will be like what will specifically be on test two, like how many multiple choice questions will be on there, how many like true and false or maybe like code interpretation questions, and then the programming question. So that'll be towards the end of this week. The test will be made available at some point next week, but that information I'll do in a Blackboard announcement. But for this week, these four assignments, do the reading. The reading will help. It's not too long. The readings are relatively short, so I would recommend going through that. Obviously this video, and there will be the other topic overview video that I will be pushing out soon. So do look for that. That's going to be for dictionaries and sets. And that's it. So I will see you guys in the other video, and then test two next week. All right. So that's it for week 9.